The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. On today's show, I have Sean McLintock. Sean is CEO and founder of ThreeDots. ThreeDots is a CBD beverage company based in the UK. Sean, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Anuj. Thanks for having me.
Real pleasure. How's things in this crazy situation we're living through?
Oh, well, I'm having another lockdown in the UK. Obviously, for us, it's quite stressful as it affects sales. But, we're staying positive and we have a lot to look forward to. So just really trying to be kind to ourselves and keep going forward.
Good stuff. We'll get into a bit more detail about the brand in a second. Why don't we start with a bit about you?
Yeah, sure. Like you and probably like a lot of people you've had on your show, I studied law. I've spent the majority of my professional career working in the United States in the tech industry. I worked for a company called Andela where we help train software developers across Africa. So yeah, always been blessed to really have jobs with a deep purpose. And I've really tried to follow that through with ThreeDots and, now working with something that I truly believe in. And it's such a joy every day.
Brilliant. That's great. And what sort of attracted you to CBD or cannabis in general?
A mix of personal, family, and kind of anecdotal evidence. I've had various back operations throughout my life. I had my first operation when I was 19, and I've generally always suffered from sleeplessness, pain, and anxiety. I've also had the I've been put on multiple different drugs for pain, from oxycodone to tramadol. And they've had a big impact on my life and my health. And I got introduced to cannabis medicinally while I was in the United States. And I was in California at the time. And I think for me, it was just a huge eye-opener. It started to replace 1 pill a day, 2 pills a day. And eventually, not having to even use it every day, it's completely changed my life. And honestly, I can say the same for 2 of my family members as well, who have both suffered with cancer. And I also think, CBD, particularly on the epilepsy side and some of the evidence that started to come out, it was just too hard to ignore. And I was kind of sick of being in the hamster wheel, wanting to do something that I really believed in and that I felt could help others. And yeah, I feel like this is my pathway to that journey. Yeah.
Yeah, there's often a very personal reason behind people getting involved. Did you encounter any stigma or challenges from family members or friends when you said, I'm kind of getting into this area? Or
yeah, it was a very difficult conversation with my dad initially. They couldn't quite understand it. But my dad then started, to his credit, using CBD oil, as a few of his friends were, and it really started to help him with his hips and his knee pain. And then I think, that, as I say, the evidence, the anecdotal evidence and just people's experiences make it very difficult to ignore. And while it was difficult in the beginning, I think everyone's really warmed up to it. It's been a difficult journey because we've never really had clear guidelines and regulations. And so I think, it's really been a game of snakes and ladders, but everyone's along for the ride and it's quite exciting now, actually.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we'll get into some of the challenges and actually that was kind of the main topic of the show. But let's talk a bit about ThreeDots, which is your CBD beverage company. Tell us a bit about it. What does it do, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I have 2 other co-founders. One is based in South Africa and one is based in the US. We have plans to expand to those markets. We all were living in New York at the time when we came up with ThreeDots, or the concept of wanting to kind of spread a little bit of kindness around. I think for us, CBD, as I said, was too hard to ignore. We had all had really positive experiences with it. And in the States at the time, there was a massive boom. A few beverages started to be released at the time in New York. And before we went our separate ways, I think we came to the conclusion that beverages were the least intimidating way for the average consumer to get involved. Also the least expensive. And in low dosages that didn't maybe allow for any potential interactions with other medications, for example, heart medications. And so we also saw that as a way to really get CBD into the mainstream. Beverages are a really high volume product. It hasn't been an easy journey, but we're still dedicated to water solubility and the bioavailability that's present in beverages and just the ease of use for everyday consumers. And I think the biggest thing for us really was, how do we allow people to integrate their health practices into their daily lifestyle and eating practices? And for us, like a sparkling water was the ultimate choice, right? We were huge fans of La Croix, but we wanted to make a more natural version, and that was really the genesis.
Great. And so you've got, it's carbonated. How many flavors have you got, and how many product lines and things like that?
Yeah, we've got 3 flavors. We've got blueberry hibiscus. We've got peach and rooibos. Rooibos is a South African bush, which is commonly used as a tea. And then we have my personal favorite, which is grapefruit basil. They're all super low calories. They're below 20 calories per can. Less than 2 grams of sugar per can. No sweeteners, no bad stuff. Just, really delicious sparkling water with 15 milligrams of CBD. And then to kind of amplify and that entourage effect, we've added ashwagandha, which is an ancient Ayurvedic adaptogen. Ginseng, which is from ancient Chinese medicine, also an adaptogen. And then lemon balm, which the ancient Greeks and Romans used throughout their legions and fighting forces for anxiety, PTSD, and pain. So we've tried to concoct a daily kind of cocktail of goodness.
It's great. I'm always a big fan of people using non-cannabis ingredients to sort of enhance or accentuate the effect. So it's great that you're using those other kind of herbs. Any reason that you chose to do a carbonated drink as opposed to a non-carbonated drink?
Yeah, this was a fight between us as founders as well. It was a really difficult choice. In hindsight, we would have loved to have done both. But carbonated drinks for us offered the most amount of versatility. I think sparkling water is seeing a massive boom throughout the world. The numbers really paint a very rosy picture for functional sparkling beverages. And also, there's something, when you carbonate a beverage, it helps take away some astringency in taste. And when we first started making our beverages, water-soluble emulsions notoriously haven't been the most easy products to work with.
For cannabinoids, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we felt that carbonation just provided an extra little bit of sweetness without having to add sweeteners or sugars, etc.
It's great. Great focus on the taste. I love it.
Yeah.
And so, look, you're a young business, and perhaps this hasn't happened yet, but have you had any pivots, or are you looking at any pivots?
Have we had pivots? I think we had multiple pivots in the early days, figuring out, all the complexities of working with CBD, but no major pivots in terms of our product lines. I think our early pivots were really just about finding out which ingredients could work with cannabis in a water-soluble format and in a mass commercial format. And there's some funny stories there that we don't need to get into. But yeah, pivot is always something on an entrepreneur's mind. I think always needs to be on an entrepreneur's mind. And we certainly have some ideas if regulations don't go the way that we think or hope they're going to go. And we've definitely kept our options open.
So tell us about that beautiful thing called novel foods.
Yeah.
How are you as a business coping with that? It's a big burden, big challenge for the industry.
Yeah, it's been tough. It's like kind of that up until the last 3 months, it's been that monster under your bed that you know is there, but you've never really seen it, right? But now it's really real. I think on the whole, as a brand, as founders, we actually support novel foods or some form of regulatory process. There's been multiple people on your show and you have spoken to, the type of products that are out there and the lack of, traceability, the lack of accountability, and the lack of communication with consumers about what's actually in the product. So I think there needs to be something. I don't think novel foods is fit for purpose as a procedure. So it's been difficult to try and balance kind of two factions, right? Because novel foods is a typical process. It's been used for multiple foods for decades. Chia seeds recently went through a novel foods process. But it doesn't work for an ingredient as complex as cannabis, which has multiple, 130 plus cannabinoids, flavonoids, and terpenes. Each of those things have different interactions with the body. Each of them have different interactions with other ingredients. And I think the regulators and the FSA has really struggled in figuring out the approach to take, i.e., is it going to be an isolate, a whole plant, or kind of broad spectrum situation? I mean, as is evident, it's kind of gone down the isolate route purely, I believe, so that they can isolate CBD as an ingredient, and therefore, you decrease the risk of any of those other interactions from those hundreds of other ingredients in a whole plant extract. So we've been super disappointed, I think, from that, because we were a big believer in full spectrum products, provided they were beneath, 0.2% THC. We're big believers in the entourage effect. But at the same time, the fact that we still have a process to go through to approve our CBD is quite exciting. The rest of Europe doesn't have that option. And so we're grateful for that. I think ultimately these things come down to money and time. And it's been a huge time suck where we could have been focusing on other things. Simultaneously, we've also had to deal with COVID. And so just time-wise, it's been quite terrible. And it's really expensive. And there are a few key ingredient providers who are doing their applications, and brands need to hop on board, either supporting dossiers or join those dossiers. And so there's a big consolidation happening. I think the consolidation was always bound to happen, but I think it's going to dramatically increase, especially after March next year. There's a lot of confusion over this FSA ruling that any products produced or manufactured after February of 2020 cannot go through a novel foods process. That's been confusing. Obviously, it doesn't affect us, but for other brands, it's been very confusing. And generally, it's just been a roller coaster of mixed signals from the regulators, coupled with really expensive consultants and legal processes. That has been really a tough process, yeah.
Yeah. It's always the lawyers that win.
It's true. I kind of wish I was still a lawyer. Yeah.
That's great. And it's really good to hear practical input from what that novel foods process is like. So thank you for sharing that. And just finally on ThreeDots, before we kind of go on to a bit of the actual challenges that are involved in making CBD and cannabis products, how have you found the fundraising environment during COVID? You're a young business, this will be very important to you and lots of people in this space.
Yeah, so we've actually just started our first fundraise now. Thankfully, we were self-funded up until now. As I alluded to earlier, novel foods has been a serious financial burden. And so, we're looking to external funds now to get through that and to make sure that we can make a big mark once we are approved next year with the bigger retailers that we're in conversations with. There's been mixed signals depending on who you speak to. I think there is a lot of cash out there. Interest rates are low. You have SEIS approval. Generally, there's a subset of investors that find you very attractive from a tax angle. And we are lucky as founders to have expertise in that area. So I don't think it's been too difficult to find people. I think what I can really just break it down to is two camps. Those who are incredibly concerned that novel foods is going to go completely ORI, and, there may be even more strict regulations or complete clampdown next year at some point or whenever in the future. Or there are those people who think novel foods is kind of just a filter mechanism, and after the filter's been applied, the market's going to continue to liberalize and there's going to be huge opportunity. So depending on who you speak to, it can be really easy or
half
really
full
hard.
or half empty.
Yeah. And obviously because of the mixed signals, there's more in the former camp. So it's been a tough story to tell people and investors especially.
Yeah. Never easy to fundraise though. So
yeah,
one of the normal challenges, I'm sure. But that was great. Thank you for telling us all of that stuff about the brand. Again, really great to have a young entrepreneur going through all of these things. You can talk candidly about the actual challenges of cannabis as an ingredient in a consumer product. Could you tell us a bit about that? What are the processes involved in making your CBD drink and how hard is it because it's CBD?
So firstly, please stop me if I get nerdy on some of the processes. I focus on this in the team, and I actually really love working with cannabis because it's been such a big challenge. One of the things we said as a team before we started this is, we just want to be honest and open with consumers. And so that's why I'm willing to sit and talk super candidly about the problems that we have, and all of the challenges and obstacles we've had to kind of overcome. We can't pretend that it is at really high quality commercial grade yet, because it just isn't. I think there's a long way to go for cannabis to become a stable and very predictable commercial ingredient when producing at scale.
And this affects everyone in the industry.
I think so. It definitely affects beverage manufacturers more because of the complexities of making a beverage. I think the process of making a beverage is everything is mixed together in a giant batch tank. And depending on where you fill and where you manufacture, that batch tank can be 10,000 liters or it can be 500 liters. Our batch tank is 8,000 liters. So everything goes in there, and you have to add the ingredients at certain intervals and at certain dilutions, particularly so that the CBD is not exposed to, acidic environments or rough pH and Brix level. So that was our first real major challenges. When do we add the CBD and how much do we add? And how do we make sure that all the CBD is mixed in? Because as you know, CBD is an oil, it's fatty. And even when you coat it with the liposome, that liposome is generally a fat. And so even if you've got really small particles, our particles are not nano, they're about 600 nm, which is relatively large. But, these things stick to stuff. And you've got to do these extra mixes, and working with the manufacturers to try and figure out how to do that was a challenge. And then also you have filters in pumps. And these filters are designed to pick up any kind of residue in the mixer that comes from the mixer. And because we've got these fatty, sticky compounds that are cannabinoids, and liposomes, they get stuck to the filter. And so you have all of these obstacles along the way before the thing is even canned, where it's taking away the CBD that you added in the beginning. And so you have to account for that, because you have to make sure that what you put in the can is what you say. And we've been extremely strict with ourselves about that. And we've put a QR code on our can, actually, where customers can just scan it and they can immediately see what the lab results for that particular batch have been over time as well. So we're trying to show people, okay, if you pick up our can in 6 months' time, we're not going to tell you there's been no degradation, because there has been a bit of degradation, but this is how much it is, because we tested it last week. So that's been our way of kind of countering the degradation and the loss of CBD that occurs. What I can tell you is we found a way to make sure that we do put 15 milligrams in at the start, but there are multiple challenges with beverages. If you're in a glass see-through bottle, for example, you're exposing your CBD to sunlight, its worst enemy, which degrades at a rapid rate. If you put it in a can, we have can liners that suck up some of the CBD, but it does kind of stop over time. That's challenging to work with, right? And then, we have been exploring some other methods of packaging like Tetra Pak, but I won't get into that now. But yeah, there's tons of challenges in working with this ingredient and making sure that you're being accountable and transparent with your consumers so that they know what they're getting as well. And I think that's been our approach in overcoming some of the challenges that we just maybe don't quite have the science to overcome yet.
That's brilliant. It's, again, thank you so much for the honesty. And it's really good to sort of understand these things. People don't probably understand the complexity of the processes involved. What about once you've kind of further along in the production process, are there any other challenges that crop up there that are particular to this?
We can talk about cannabis business challenges for days, right? we have banking challenges, we have, advertising challenges, we can't advertise on Facebook and Instagram. We very often have shipping challenges. We produce in Austria, just quite near to the Red Bull factory. Austria, interestingly enough, was the country in the EU that actually instigated the novel foods process for CBD. And so they're very strict on import-export. So we've had some troubles there. But I think once you convince the regulators, the officials and the people that you work with that you're a legitimate enterprise and you do testing on a constant basis, I really think reputation allows you to start working more like a regular business. What I do hope, though, in the future is that the banks and big American tech companies that control the advertising space, the online advertising space, allow CBD to enter the market. Yeah,
it's quite a steep learning curve. And in particular, you're a cool young brand. I would imagine Instagram is a real hunting ground for meeting customers and people that might engage with you. Not being able to use paid advertising must be a big challenge. How have you gone been thinking around that problem?
Yeah, it's been actually quite an eye-opener. We've looked at all sorts of different things from from illegally putting up like posters in the streets or on building sites, which we didn't do, by the way, to, using up new startups that are leveraging learnings from the gambling and vaping industries to reach a similar subset of consumers. What we found through that process, working with two separate entities, is it's really expensive. In some ways, we're still a guinea pig for a lot of these ancillary businesses trying to find a way around those obstacles. And that means that the learning curve is super steep and it's not always as smooth as it could be. So what we've just tried to do is be as organic as possible. We're out in the streets, we're doing giveaways, we're interacting with people that we look up to and inspire towards, such as, just really influential founders. A lot of women entrepreneurs as well have been really vocal supporters of us, which has been fantastic. And yeah, we're definitely just trying to align ourselves with the right voices out there who can spread the message without having, for us to have to pay for that advertising.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major challenge, isn't it? And lots of people are having to think creatively to get around.
And look, some people are amazing and they get it right. We're still learning.
Yeah.
It's been a challenge.
Yeah, no, but good to be honest about it. So let's talk about the good news stuff. We talked all about challenges and barriers and things.
There is good news.
Well, come on, hit me with some good news.
Oh, man, it's been, despite COVID, it's been an amazing year. I think people are focusing on their mental health much more. They're focusing on their health much more. I think awareness around products like CBD and adaptogens has become much, much more prolific. That people, it's like whether this is a good thing or not, are engaging with Instagram a lot more. And I think the brands that are out there supporting people to be better versions of themselves are actually really winning. I know it sounds cheesy and cliche, but it's true. And we've been riding that wave. Our online orders have been fantastic. We've had a lot of support through our bigger retailers like Planet Organic and Budgeons. And we've had some fantastic, although confidential, discussions with some of the largest retailers in the country. On top of that, we're also rolling out in Holland and Barrett next week. And we just rolled out in Revital last week. So it's been really, really cool to see some of the bigger retail guys come in and say, despite this novel foods process, we're looking, accept that this is a product category now. It's typically really high margins as well for them, so they like it. And yeah, it's been cool to be recognized. A year ago when we started selling our product, it was a lot of raised eyebrows, whereas now it's like, oh wow, that's really cool. How do you work with this? What can it do? Where can I put it in the fridge? Like, what's my route to how am I approaching this? Whereas, a year ago it was just kind of, sorry, dude, come back another time. So for me, I'm a salesman at heart, that is just so much fun. Yeah.
When you have a receptive audience. Yeah.
And a more educated audience because of people like yourselves.
Thank you. Look, I think when you're talking about these, you're talking about established retailers, some of the supermarkets, these guys. How have you found the level of understanding coming from the buyers at these places?
Surprisingly good. As I say, over time, it's definitely grown. It was a mixed bag in the beginning. I mean, we've been called drug dealers. But also I think now really, I think CBD is such a huge market. It's bigger than the vitamin C and D and B market combined in the UK. I mean, that's really huge if you think about it, right? There's a lot of products out there, whether they're good or bad. They've contributed to an awareness to, people wanting to be educated. A lot of mainstream media has been covering this. World Health Organization and the World Anti-Doping Association have published really helpful, objective, scientific analysis on the product as well, on CBD and its interaction with other ingredients and medicines. And that's just, all of this has kind of created a wave of awareness that's been really helpful for us. And I found it really cool also that buyers who aren't fully aware are comfortable enough to ask the question.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good question. Level of customer insight that you're getting, are you much more a lifestyle brand, or are people using it as a post-gym kind of, is there an allusion to sports and exercise?
One thing we've always wanted to do as a brand is be honest. We have 15 milligrams of CBD in our drink. That is not enough to heal all your aches and pains. It's just enough to really help an anxious feeling, or to stop a panic onset, or to just help you integrate a more balanced intake throughout your day. But yeah, no, we definitely haven't pushed ourselves as a kind of BCAA or after sports drink. I drink it after sport every day. And I do think that the adaptogens in there really help as well. But we've generally found ourselves to be much more successful in small retail stores and farm stores, and coffee shops. Cafes have been hugely successful for us, particularly in affluent areas, as you can imagine.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, and again, always good to be honest about these things.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm doing myself a favor or not, but yeah, that's who we are as a brand, and you know, we're brash and honest, and that's how we like it.
It's refreshing. It's good. I really do like it. So my final question is actually going to be around sustainability.
Yeah,
I think every brand now, it's a kind of a necessary consideration and a priority. How are you guys approaching this in relation to what you're doing?
Dude, that has been a tough topic. From the beginning, I've been shocked at the level of unsustainable practices that are in the FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods industry. It is crazy. Just small things like double wrapping your pallets with plastic. It's almost 8 by 2 meters of plastic sheeting, right? And we're producing, 20, 30, 40 pallets at a time. It really gets a lot. We've taken a huge effort. We only use recycled cardboard for our cardboards. We've switched now to printed cans, so we're not labeled cans any longer, which means our cans are fully recyclable. Cans are the most recycled product in the world. Typically, a can will be back on the shelf in the form of a new can in 8 months, which is super cool.
Good stat.
Yeah, so it's a useful stat. Thank you, Zenith Global. And yeah, but it has been a challenge. One thing we really, really want to do is start using natural plastics. I would love to use a hemp plastic or a hemp packaging, a cardboard packaging. It's just too expensive for us right now. But we are looking at those options all the time. And we're actually in conversation with a couple of different manufacturers. So as soon as we can roll that out, we are going to. But we've also chosen suppliers like our fulfillment and warehousing company. They're carbon neutral. They replanted an entire forest in Yorkshire and saved a species of newt. In the process, which we thought was super neat. And they only use electric vehicles and solar power and stuff. So we make a conscious effort to be as good as we can. But at the same time, I think we could do more. And I think a lot of smaller brands, what I would like to do and what our marketing manager has been trying to do is develop a kind of group of smaller brands to work together to start to push for these practices where they're sharing services. Things like the natural plastics, things like not double wrapping pallets, etc.
That's brilliant. A cooperative approach to these things is great. And it's a huge challenge, particularly as a young business. You don't have the economies of scales of Unilever or someone that can do these things. So it's good that you're trying where you can and that you're looking to improve always.
Yeah, and the tough part is as well, and which is really good, is when you hold yourself accountable as a brand and you openly ask your consumers for feedback and to hold you accountable, you really have to look at these things seriously. So we've definitely had vocal consumers. We've had vocal service providers because we demand a lot. But I think, we have to make the effort. And if you don't, it doesn't fly with the educated consumer of the modern age.
Absolutely. Well, a positive note to leave us on, which is great. And Sean, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really refreshingly honest and open, which I love, and always a pleasure to see you. So I look forward to the next time we can have you on and talking post novel foods and post fundraise.
Maybe we can talk THC drinks. That would be cool.
Well, maybe. Let's see. Cool. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Inês.